The following episode of Charlotte, a City of International Success is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Coming up next on Charlotte, a City of International Success, I will interview Mrs. Tanya Beckler. And we're going to talk about Beckler family, and we're going to talk about the melodious instrument, cello. Stay with us. Welcome to Charlotte, a City of International Success. I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Today our guest is Mrs. Tanya Beckler, and she is the founder of Beckler Ensemble. Mrs. Tanya Beckler, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. You can call me Tanya, please.
I know, that's why I was just laughing, simply because, we have known each other, and I think you can call me Maha, and we'll call each other by first names.
That sounds good, yeah.
And, Beckler name is very well known in the Charlotte region, and
Yes.
simply because we also have Beckler Museum, and the beautiful, milestone, the main piece, that is the Firebird in Charlotte as well, by the museum, and everything that you and your family have done for this community. And so this name is very familiar to many people. So can we travel back a little bit as to where you're from, and then let's talk a little bit about your grandparents and parents and the history
Absolutely.
of this. It's a
Okay,
very
thank
important
you,
name.
yeah.
So you're originally from Switzerland?
Yes, I grew up in Zurich until I was 12 and went to school there and started the cello there actually as well. And in our country, there's museums everywhere. So even just our city in Zurich has many, many museums. So we grew up with art, with a lot of culture. And I feel very fortunate. And of course, my grandparents' house was always full of art and sculptures.
Really?
yes.
Now, were they artists or were they businessmen?
Well, my grandparents were business people.
Business people, okay.
And,
they were collecting art.
That's right, because in our country, if you are successful as a business person, then you very often give back to the arts. And that could be music. In this case, it was painting and sculptures. And they had a very good eye for artists at that time. It was abstract, and a lot of people did not appreciate that art at that time. So they were very forward-thinking, in some ways visionaries, and they befriended some of the artists, and so amassed this wonderful collection. And so that is something in our country that you give back and you support the arts because you realize how important that is to your being, to your soul, if you want.
Was the collection in their house?
Yes, it was. And it was over many years, of course. They started small with just one piece, and over probably 40 years they collected, and it all was in their house. And some sculptures, of course, they were outside in the garden, and we, as children, we would love to go and climb on top of them. And
Really? They let you climb on? These are the collector's pieces?
That's right, the very valuable pieces.
Oh my goodness.
And there's a funny story about that actually, because in the entrance of the house, there's a sculpture. It's the horse, Marino Marini horse. It's bronze, and all 9 grandchildren were riding this horse on a regular basis when we go visit. So many years later, when it was evaluated by Sotheby's, they noted that the patina was a little bit different right there where you would be sitting, and so we had actually devalued the piece somewhat. But they were wonderful because they really felt the art was there to be enjoyed, and you live with it. So they never reprimanded us. There was one occasion where you could see one painting, maybe to the height of a 4-year-old, that has a few smudges on it from jam or whatnot. And so They were very, very gracious and very tolerant of the grandchildren.
Well, I think those kind of pieces actually have their own value, right? Personal
That's
value
right.
of your grandchild's probably handprints and fingerprints.
And if nothing else, it makes for a good story.
That's wonderful. So then really growing up and the schools and education, what you're saying is art is part of your education.
That's right. Everyone goes to public schools because they're very, very good, unless you have a problem. Then if you have a special need, you would go to a private school. So all the public schools have a music system called ORF. And so you learn the basics of music, the rhythm, and you have rhythm sticks. You learn how to sing, you have choir, so you know about the scales. And then as you get a little bit older, maybe age 8 or 9, you get to try out some more advanced instruments. And so in my case, when I was 9, I was able to try out the cello. And I played it once, and I absolutely loved the sound. And I went home, I told my mom, and she was so supportive. She went out and said, okay, I'm going to go get you a cello. And by the next week, I had a cello, and I was starting lessons. And so that's how it all began.
You know, usually you think, okay, children they're going to get over this.
That's
you
right.
don't go for it because it's like, okay, let's give about a month or 2 or 4, just to see where they are.
No, and it was also fortunate that we always had ensembles to play in. So be it a choir or chamber music or an orchestra. But everybody really did it. Every family had children that played music. That is just normal. So maybe as an adult you wouldn't play anymore, but you have that foundation. And I always felt it was extremely important that I had, whether or not I was going to become a professional musician, that I had the arts because I really felt it made me more intelligent. And I never had issues with any of the more intellectual subjects. And I really think it's that right-left brain coming together. And so you need that creative side to be activated. And then the other side of the brain can also work better. And I always swear that made a huge difference in my education and how I learned. And we also in our school had many crafts. So we had weaving, the boys got to do wood carving. So it was really, I think it's very important.
Thinking about that kind of experience when you're surrounded not only by art and music and museums, and of course grandparents and parents who are supportive of all this, what you're doing. How was it, when did you come to Charlotte and why did you move here?
I was 12 years old when my family immigrated, and my grandfather and his brother had a very successful business in Zurich. And it was many faceted with the textile industries and metal products. And so we came here actually in connection with textiles, with Pneumafil. And so when we came to this country, really Charlotte was a cultural desert. I was the first foreigner at the high school I went to, and there was the Mint Museum, the old Mint Museum on Randolph, that existed. But other than that, it was quite a shock for us to that was a big part that was missing in our life.
What's the education level? Because sometimes I just hear that the education level is so different.
It's true. It's a very high level in Switzerland. And when I came here, I was surprised, especially in math, that their level was probably 2 or 3 years below where I was.
Wow.
So
that's a big gap.
That was quite a shock to me. But of course, the language was new to me. And so I had a lot of catching up to do with learning.
Did you speak English?
We learned a little bit, but it was the British English, the Queen's English.
Yes.
So when I tried to use that here, nobody really understood me. And I couldn't understand the Southern accent anyway. So I went to after school to a program every day, and you learn it very fast once you live in the country, so we caught up fairly quickly.
That is true, and some people just watch like Sesame Street and other shows too.
I know. I love Lucy and Gilligan's Island and Fantasyland. I watched that all the time.
Nice shows. So after you came here, obviously then did you decide to pursue music as your career?
I really was unsure, but I just knew I loved the instrument. But then one of my former teachers, Janice Nielsen, who's also in the Charlotte Symphony and was my colleague for a number of years, she encouraged me, and I also had some other teachers that said, you know, you could become a professional, but you need to start going to music camps. So in the summers, I started going to Brevard Music Camp. And so that pushed me a little bit further. And then I started realizing, well, maybe that is something I could go into. And then I auditioned for my senior year at North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem.
Oh, wow.
And so at that point, it was becoming clear to me that this was the path I was going to choose. And that was another thing that was actually very lucky that we moved to this country, because in Switzerland, you already have to know by a very young age, around 12, whether or not you're going to be a musician. So you have to already be pretty proficient. Wow. And you're evaluated. And if your level's not already fairly high, you will not have a chance to go study and become a professional. So I would have never been a professional cellist in Switzerland. So it's really thanks to moving to America. Like they say, the land of opportunities. That is very true.
12 years old, you need to make a decision about it. Yeah, I know there's some countries, including, you know, India, basically by high school time, you have to choose your path. But this is even earlier.
Yes.
You know, you're talking about 12 years to make the decision. So when you came here, did you come with your family for a specific reason?
Yes. So we had, with the company from my grandfather and his brother, there was a connection with textile industry.
Your grandfather's name, just for record?
Hans Bechtler. Hans Bechtler. And so there was a branch of the company, Pneumafil, that was in Charlotte. And so that is what actually brought us here. And my grandfather had also patented a few things for the cotton industry, including a gadget that would hold together a thread if it would break, or that would suck up the lint. And
wow.
So he was also, I just found out, the first Swiss exchange student to go to MIT.
And you told me a funny story that when they originally came here, that is your grandfather, he saw a sign.
He was driving, I believe, with his brother. This was before we immigrated. And they were going through North Carolina, and they got to Rutherfordton, and they saw a sign, and it said the Bechtler Mint in Rutherfordton.
Wow.
So of course they thought, well, Bechtler is a very unusual name.
Right.
And so they researched it, and sure enough, it is our relatives, our distant relatives from Germany.
Wow.
And they were indeed the first to mint the gold coin in America. And they were a lot of people went to them to also evaluate their coins to make sure it was correct, because they were known for their high standards and really giving a true value for the coins.
That's a really neat story. And so after you came here, of course, you know, your father was then in business.
That's right.
With Pneumafil Corporation.
That's right.
And trying to do that part of it. And how did all this, I mean, you obviously were pursuing music as well. And did you say your father's name?
It's Andreas
Bechtler. And he actually is a painter?
Yes, he has done art for many, many years, but more as a hobby. And as he's gotten older and then retired, and the company was sold, then now he's doing it much more. And he just had an exhibition recently, and he does multimedia, a lot of photography. And
you know, people like that are a perfect example of that right and left brain we were talking about.
That's right.
You know, business strategies, along with that, an artist.
Yes.
And your mom is a pianist?
That's correct.
My goodness.
She got her degree from the Zurich Conservatory while she was pregnant with one of us.
Wow.
So
and how many siblings do you have?
So we're 3 girls in all, so I have 2 sisters. And one of them's here in Charlotte as well, and the other one is in San Diego, California.
Wow. So really a family of artists and business as well.
Absolutely,
you know.
yes.
And so after, obviously you decided to pursue the career and you decided to get your bachelor's degree in music, right? Now, did you pursue beyond that? Or?
I did. I went ahead and got my master's of music at Manhattan School of Music. And then after that, I ended up winning the position of all places with the Charlotte Symphony. It was a strange coincidence that right when I was studying to take auditions, which is a very specific way of really learning music, because it's orchestral excerpts and you have to really drill it, almost like you're going to the Olympics.
Wow.
And so at that point in my life, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to become an orchestral musician, have a full-time job in a symphony. And then there were 2 openings in the Charlotte Symphony. It was the first full-time job in an orchestra that I applied to, and I took it,
Then you got it.
and I won it, and it was a big surprise, because it's unusual that somebody would be able to come back to their hometown, because most orchestras, they don't even have any openings for sometimes 20 years, because people keep their jobs for their whole life in the orchestra, and there's not that many orchestras, and there are a lot of musicians out there.
Wow. Now, I would think orchestra life would be pretty challenging.
You do have a lot of new music that you have to read every week. Sometimes there's 2 programs, sometimes even 3.
Wow.
So every week you get a new program, but you learn it also when you're getting your degrees. You have an orchestral class where you're actually learning the scores. Yeah. So you already have it in your fingers, but it's just having to kind of refresh your memory. And of course, some pieces are new, but a lot of pieces do get repeated. Yeah.
And you said you've been there for 12 years?
I was there for 12 years,
Now,
that's right.
are you still with them, or?
I resigned, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Because I have a son who's 10 now.
Okay.
And the rehearsals being in the mornings and the evenings, and the concerts, of course, in the evenings, I was really gone quite a bit at night, and I missed the dinner time, the bed routines, the reading, and so I felt it was important that I stay home, and I was fortunate to have that choice to be able to stay at home. So I feel very blessed that I could make that choice.
Oh, it is, and I understand perfectly, because artist life, people don't realize it's a 24/7.
That's right.
You have to rehearse, you have to go for rehearsal, you have to rehearse at home, you have to go for your performances,
and you have to
preparation and practice, and it's a lot of work.
That's right. But it's something, you choose music because you love it.
You love it.
And so it's a joy. I mean, sometimes it is hard, but it's something, it's our passion. So we keep practicing, and we can do it till hopefully the ends of our lives.
So practice, Hora, is a retraining of the way we walk, the way we stand, the way we focus. It's much more attention on the inside, and so that gives also a great sense of calmness, so I'm able to take a lot more stress.
Yeah. So what are you doing now in that case?
Well, so now I have an ensemble called the Beckler Ensemble.
Oh, okay.
And then I play maybe 5-6 concerts at the Beckler Museum, and also at CPCC, at the community college. Yeah. And the way that came about was actually Paul Nitsch, Dr. Paul Nitsch, pianist from Queens College.
Yeah.
We got together and we said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have music and art combined? And so I approached the Beckler Museum, and they agreed they would try it for just 1 concert.
Yeah.
And it was a success. And after that, now there's so many different types of music series that they have at the museum, including jazz, and people they bring in from all over, and people really enjoy, I think, being in the art museum, surrounded by art, and hearing the music.
Oh.
And in what I do specifically with the Vice President, Christopher Lawing, he tells me what the exhibition is going to be, and he actually puts together a slideshow as well. And then I take the theme and find pieces of music that can work within that framework. And so those are basically the concerts that we do. And fortunately, we get to repeat it at CPCC.
Oh, I like that. You're already in practice.
So I do that, and then I'm also at Gardner-Webb University.
Oh, wow.
And I have a very small cello choir there and a few students, and we also have a resident quartet there, and of course we play in the orchestra. And then I teach some at CPCC as well. Yeah.
You are very busy.
I'm very, I have to say, very happy that I can stay in my profession and
It is.
be at home as well.
Well,
Have a flexible schedule.
yeah, yeah. No, well, I understand that part of it, but also, I think what you're bringing to the community, what you're bringing to the schools and children, to expose them to something like this.
Well, before I had my son, when I was still with the Charlotte Symphony, they had a wonderful program, which they still do, an educational program where musicians could go into the school system and they could teach 6 or 8 weeks courses where they would incorporate music, maybe with math or maybe with English language. In my case, I always did it with English language and music. And the interest, it was incredible to see the kids, the excitement, to see the instruments, and to get to learn about music. And then we also would incorporate stories with the music. And so for them, it just gave them a bigger picture. It stimulated their imagination, it broadened their mind, and I think it's extremely important to have that. It makes for better learning. You really, like I said before, you need that other side of the brain to be activated, and then the two can actually come together and work even better.
Yeah.
And then also, I also have a poetry and cello duo with Larry Sorkin, and we went into a high school.
Poetry and cello? Oh, wow. How do you do a duet between poetry and cello?
That's a very creative process where we use, sometimes it's, we can, for example, if there's some certain words that are accented, so the cello can imitate that, or if there's a certain feeling to the poem, again, if there's sadness, we can pick a piece that is in minor, for example. So some very simple concepts that we use.
I love that concept.
But it's effective, and again, it gives more depth to the music and more depth to the words, whether it's a story or a poetry. And the high schoolers that we did this with, they felt that they were able to write their own stories. So I could see that they were getting empowered.
Yeah.
And we had certain themes like come up with who you think you are, not what somebody calls you, but who is your ideal? Who do you want to represent? And then they could write this either as a poem or as a story, and then we would put music to that. And that, we will be doing more of that in the fall. So I'm looking forward to that.
You're really talking about creativity, and
Yes.
most of the time in schools, you're told what to do.
That's right. You're always given information, and I think it can be difficult, and you can lose yourself in that.
Yeah.
And so there's another reason why I really think that the arts are extremely important to have them in the school system for our children.
Talking about children in schools and students and teachers, in your opinion, in your personal experience, what does it take? What kind of teacher, who can stimulate?
Yes, that's a very, very good
student.
question, because it's a very fine line. And the one thing that my mother did not do is she didn't push me, which I thought it was, whether it was conscious or not, in my case, and I think in a lot of children's cases, it's important not to push, because music or the arts, it's supposed to be something fun that you enjoy to do. And even if you're just going to lessons once a week, which I did for a while, you are still getting a lot and you're learning. Because music, to learn a string instrument is extremely difficult. So it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of encouragement.
Wow.
To go through that process. And so I think if you have support from the family, and if you have a teacher that knows when to be patient and knows when to push a little bit ahead, because everybody reacts differently to their teacher. Some are more sensitive than others.
Yes.
So as you get to know the student, you kind of figure out how much you should say or shouldn't say. It's a delicate balancing act, that's for sure.
It is, definitely, sometimes you have students where you just even correct a little bit and they start crying.
I was one of those kids.
I did too. I had some of them too. So now coming on to the other side, students, cello, I think for me, when I look at it, it's a complicated instrument. And so what kind of personality or, not necessarily qualifications, but what kind of personality?
For me, it was the love of the sound.
Okay.
I heard that sound and it just did something within me. I can't really explain it. And when I studied, I also enjoyed studying the intellectual, the math, the history. But with music, I always felt it could go to a deeper place that words could never express. Even the visual arts. Music for me went to such a deep place that I felt I needed that. I really needed that in my life. Whether I was going to be a professional or not, it was extremely important for me to have that.
Everybody has music. There's some music everybody loves.
Exactly.
How early should students be learning?
That depends a little bit on the maturity of the child.
Okay.
But if a child is consistently asking to play an instrument, and Yo-Yo Ma was a rare case. He started when he was 4, but that's Yo-Yo Ma. So I would say not before 6, unless it's, again, perhaps if a child loves music so much and won't stop, then maybe a little bit earlier. But I think 6 is generally a pretty good age. I started when I was 9, which I think is plenty early too. So it just depends on the interest of the child and their maturity level, I would say, yeah.
What we are talking about is really teachers understanding individual students and working with them with their personalities. And then students themselves really, loving the sound and opening up their minds to creativity, right and left brain balance.
And to persevere, just to not stop, keep going. If there's something you love, even if it's hard, it's important to keep going. And in my case, I also had a lot of support, financially, and also just encouragement to, they liked what I did, they loved music, and all those components will...
Makes it.
Yes.
And that's what made you. And thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much.
You've been wonderful, and that instrument just sounds heavenly.
Well,
and thank you for being on our show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for watching Charlotte, a city of international success. I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Please join us again next time right here on WTBI PBS Charlotte.